Happy Darryl Sutter Day, everybody. I just want to wish you and everyone a happy Darryl Sutter Day here. As Flames fans, we were very, very happy when Darryl Sutter came to the Calgary Flames. And you might say we were just as happy, or maybe even happier, when he left the Calgary Flames. We were happy that when he came to do one job, and we were just as happy to leave when he did the other job here. And what am I getting at about a happy Darryl Sutter Day? Well, the day that he joined the Calgary Flames and the day that he left the Calgary Flames, it both happened coincidentally on December 28th here. So I am on the eve of Darryl Sutter Day, and maybe if I was mayor, I would declare a local holiday as part of this holiday season, Darryl Sutter Day. So happy Darryl Sutter Day, everyone. So yeah, we were very happy when Darryl Sutter came to the Calgary Flames. If you go back to the 2002-2003 season, the Calgary Flames, after they went through a few head coaches there. After when, much of the team has been dismantled, the 89 team, because of the rising salaries, and there was no salary cap. And keep in mind at the time there, that was the reality for the Calgary Flames and small market teams, especially small market Canadian teams, where we were faced with when a Canadian dollar was in the 60 cents US there, where, that almost would need you to buy $1.50 Canadian to get $1 US here, but the Flames couldn't compete at the time, so we definitely had a younger roster that wasn't as talented there. And, after when, let's say we had Paget for a couple of years from 95-96, then we had Brian Sutter, the first Sutter that was head coach of the Flames there. And I remember that we didn't have a talented team, but the team was competitive and worked hard here. But then going towards the 2000 there, the Calgary Flames brass decided to not renew both Brian Sutter and Al Coates' contracts. And then, the Calgary Flames, they had Don Hay, who he was the mastermind that led the Kamloops Blazers to the Memorial Cup, two teams, and actually coached Jarome Iginla. And he also was an assistant coach for the Calgary Flames when Paget was head coach. And then Don Hay had spent some time as head coach with the then Phoenix Coyotes. So he was head coach for the Calgary Flames, but he didn't last a year. So one of the guys that was on the coaching staff, and actually the Flames had a very, very young coaching staff at the time. So Calgary was led by Greg Gilbert when the Flames decided to move on from Don Hay there, and Greg Gilbert took over. And then the 01-02 season, Greg Gilbert was head coach. The Flames had a spectacular start there, and that was the year when Jarome Iginla had his first breakout season and had the Art Ross Trophy and found the chemistry with Craig Conroy. So we definitely had a couple spark plugs there, and we didn't quite have a steady goaltender. That was when Roman Turek was in that. So then the following season, Calgary disappointingly had that great start and then fell off and didn't make the playoffs there. But the following season, 2002-2003 there, the Flames, I remember, started off respectable in October there. However, November happened, and the Calgary Flames definitely they lost 11 out of 12 games in November there, and there was a matter of time before it seemed like the Flames were waiting for something to happen then, and eventually Greg Gilbert got fired, and actually Al McNeil took over as head coach there for a few weeks there, and I'm going to say he did an admirable job considering he hasn't coached for 20 years there. But at that same time, there was speculation on who was going to be the next head coach of the Calgary Flames, because Al McNeil was just, taking over on an interim basis, and Calgary was searching. And actually, Greg Gilbert, if I remember, he was not the first coach that got fired that year. Actually, Darryl Sutter, he actually coached before he came to Calgary. He was the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks after Mike Keenan then was head coach, and then decided to be general manager only. And I'll be mentioning Mike Keenan later in this video. Darryl Sutter was head coach for the Chicago Blackhawks, and then I'm going to say his first breakout to being the head coach, showing how he's one of the better coaches in the league, was the job that he did with the San Jose Sharks as they were building up from their expansion years there. But there was actually rumors that Ted Nolan was eventually going to be the head coach, and Calgary kept waiting and waiting and waiting. But they didn't call Ted Nolan, but it was actually on December 28th, 2002. And that day actually happens to fall on a Saturday, just coincidentally in 2019 here. The Calgary Flames hired Darryl Sutter to be the head coach here. And I felt at the time there, I was excited about it, and many fans were on the call-in shows were actually excited about it, because I felt like between Brian Sutter and Darryl Sutter at the time, I mean, the Flames seemed to have lost its identity there, and, you know, they seemed to played okay under Greg Gilbert. Don Hay, it just didn't work out. I mean, some coaches, they're, you know, they could be a brilliant, you know, junior head coach, but they just don't have that transition to being an NHL coach here. And then Greg Gilbert, I think the Flames responded to them well, and I know he had a few outbursts there. And I mean, he is one of those, as a player, I mean, he's been through the trenches where, you know, he was on both New York teams that won the Stanley Cup and played under Mike Keenan a few times and Al Arbor, so he's definitely played under some legendary coaches with reputation there. But I just felt between after Brian Sutter then Darryl Sutter there, you know, I just felt like at the time when the Flames brought in Darryl Sutter, it was almost like they made a mistake on we shouldn't have let Brian Sutter go, because believe it or not, after when the Calgary Flames decided to move on from, it was both Brian Sutter and Hal Coates, and then actually Craig Button, who you see him on TSN. Craig Button actually was one of the directors of the Dallas Stars, and then he actually was general manager of the Calgary Flames. And I think he did a so-so job at best as a Calgary Flame there. And the other thing that I think one of the bad thing, or not one of the great things that happened in the 02-03 season, is that the Calgary Flames had Mark Savard at the time, and he was one of the younger scoring wingers or centermen that we've had. We nicknamed him Savvy, and you know, eventually he had to retire due to concussion problems there. But he didn't get along well with Greg Gilbert. So ultimately, we traded Mark Savard to then the Atlanta Thrashers for some Russian player that don't even know if he exists. And Mark Savard took off even more at the Atlanta Thrashers. And then 2 weeks later, that's when we decided to fire Greg Gilbert there. I think looking back, we probably should have let the coach go and kept Mark Savard in retrospect, because I think the writing was on the wall for Greg Gilbert here. But getting back to, you know, when they decided to move on from Brian Sutter and Hal Coates there, actually it was considered that Brian Sutter was almost a finalist to become a head coach again. And looking back at the candidates we looked at, because we looked at Don A, Brian Trottier, we should have brought back Brian Sutter, because he actually was considered to come back as head coach under a new regime. And I know that definition of, you know, insanity is expecting some different results while doing the same thing there, but given those candidates. But yeah, I mean, Brian Sutter, I think Brian and Darryl kind of had that similar style there. And back then, I mean, it was, you know, hard-working, grinded out hockey, defensive-minded hockey there. But you know, when Darryl Sutter took over for the Calgary Flames, there was actually some excitement. And actually, even though the season, the 2002-2003 season, was essentially a lost cause at the time, after, you know, November hit, we lost 11 out of 12 games, and decided to, yeah, we had to let Greg Gilbert go. And we didn't have a great team there. I mean, we still had Roman Turek and Jamie McLennan, and that was the goalie tandem at the time there. And we still had a, you know, young Jarome Iginla, who definitely was showing signs of breaking out and showing up that maybe he is going to be one of the best power forwards in the game there. And then he definitely took it to the next level there. But if you look at the coaching record here, and I mean, I'm going to pull up the Wikipedia here, but there was definitely signs that when Darryl Sutter took over the head coach, and actually I remember it was Saturday. He ran his first practice with with the Calgary Flames. As we were preparing for the next game on the 29th there, we were taking on the Anaheim Ducks, and we actually won that game. The first game that Darryl Sutter was head coach of the Calgary Flames there. And what was refreshing is I don't remember exactly what triggered it, but it was in the first period there. I think there was a controversial play or a call or a hit there, but it was actually refreshing that we saw Darryl Sutter. He was yelling at the referees, and he was lively on the bench there, and that was actually refreshing to see that at the time. And I felt like they, looking back at that season there, the 2002-2003 season, Calgary was waiting for something to happen. And then something happened here, and, it was Al McNeil was definitely a nice stopgap until Darryl Sutter took over here. But even though the season was a lost cause, the Calgary Flames actually, under Darryl Sutter, when he took over the rest of the season there, Calgary in 46 games was 19-8-1 and collected 47 points. They were long out of the playoffs here, but signs were showing that the Flames could be turning the corner here. And they definitely did. And actually what happened was that Craig Button, the then general manager's contract, was expiring there, and they definitely did not renew the contract. So they decided to make Darryl Sutter head coach and general manager there. So I'm going to say maybe that was both a good and a bad thing here, because it's definitely much, much more difficult now when you have a cap to manage and, your coach and general manager here. But looking back after the 2002-03 season there, I felt like there was hope. This team was looking more competitive and had the makings of being a hard-working team and, maybe do something special there. And then the quote, I know it was when Brian Sutter was head coach here, and, the Calgary Flames had to work under a shoestring budget, and that was also during the Young Guns era there, that I like this quote. And actually Darryl Sutter definitely did this too with the Calgary Flames when he was head coach, was making chicken soup out of chicken feathers there. And I felt that Brian Sutter did all he could. I mean, actually, before he became the head coach of the Calgary Flames, he always coached the team to the playoffs until he came to Calgary. And I know his record doesn't look pretty, and it's probably has one of the worst winning percentages as head coach there. I definitely like Brian Sutter a lot better than Pierre Pagé, but Brian Sutter definitely, I think, overplayed his goalies at the time there, but we also didn't have as talented a team there. But then this season happened. The first full season that Darryl Sutter was head coach of the Calgary Flames here, and he also was the general manager there, and I think so far it looked good for him to be general manager there, because in 2003, looking back there, you can probably say it was the best draft class to ever happened. 1999 definitely was the worst draft class, but we drafted Dion Phaneuf, and that was after when Ryan Suter was off the board, and Dion Phaneuf definitely looked like a great draft pick at the time there. And then Darryl Sutter acquired a new goalie because Roman Turek was hurt and wasn't playing well, and Jamie McLennan was playing. I think Turek was hurt, and Jamie McLennan was also playing hurt as well. So Calgary needed a new goalie, and given that Darryl Sutter used to be with San Jose, and he was familiar with this guy named Miikka Kiprusoff. You might recall Miikka Kiprusoff. Keep in mind when San Jose had they had a very strong team, and they were still looked like one of the cup contenders there. They had Bessa Toskala and Evgeny Nabokov for Gmeniko. If Evgeny Nabokov was the starting goalie and Bessa Toskala was the backup, Miikka was a third string, and actually Miikka definitely didn't really break out to be one of the best goalies in the league until he went to these guys here, and all we traded was a second-round draft pick, which actually San Jose didn't totally get fleeced, because they actually drafted Marc-Edouard Vlasic with that second-round pick there, but I think that was a pretty good trade for the Calgary Flames. And then, the Calgary Flames also brought in some character guys like Billy Neiman in, Marcus Nielsen, and he got Chris Simon there at the deadline there, but Chris Simon actually was hurt for much of the 2004 playoff run there, but with the emergence of Miikka Kiprusoff and Jarome Iginla really taking off his form there, and actually you can credit Craig Button for this signing, but he brought in Martin Jolinas and brought in guys like Sean Donovan there. Another trade that you could debate if it's good or not, that one of the first trades that Darryl Sutter made was when we traded. I mean, we had Chris Drury here, and I felt that he wasn't happy here, and he didn't want to be a Flame more. That's when he got traded to Buffalo there in the package, where we got Steven Reinprecht and Rhett Warner there. So those were definitely character guys. Fortunately for Steven Reinprecht, though, he also was hurt during the playoff run there. But I mean, 2003, 2004. I mean, definitely was a magical run to the Stanley Cup Finals here, and you could definitely credit Darryl Sutter for finding a way to get the most out of his team, and you can barely say we should have won the Stanley Cup there, but I mean, it was incredible there that we had guys like Steve Montador and Mike Commodore. You could say Mike Commodore especially became a cult hero for the Calgary Flames then. I mean, if I remember the 2004 playoff run there, Calgary was without a couple defensemen and a whole line there. I mean, definitely depth was tested, and if we had a little more depth there, I think we probably could have had an easier time and won the Stanley Cup. But I mean, I remember Matthew Lombardi in the second round there. He definitely he got knocked out by Darian Hatcher. I remember in the Detroit series there. But, I mean, the reason why we ultimately, got away to the finals there. I mean, we had that emotional series against the Vancouver Canucks there, and got timely offense there. You can also maybe say we had a little luck, maybe in a way that Vancouver didn't have Todd Bertuzzi because he had that suspension after he went ape with on Steve Moore there, and they were facing an injured Marcus Naslund and Trevor Linden there. But Calgary definitely had the bigger hearts there, and finally beat the Vancouver Canucks and won a playoff series there. And man, I was thrilled as hell when that happened. You can maybe say that's the sports gods paying us back from 1994 there. And then Kipper played out of his mind after in Detroit there, because I felt game one there, it was like, it was a nice run, but we still managed to win that in overtime. And I believe it was actually Marcus Nielsen, and it was games 5 and 6 that Calgary definitely grinded down the Red Wings. Kipper played out of his mind and, got the timely goal against Martin Jones again. And then San Jose, I mean, we had a quick 2-0 lead in the series there, and forced San Jose to have to win 4-5 there. It got interesting when San Jose came back, but how fitting that we beat the Sharks in the conference championship with Darryl Sutter as our head coach and Miikka Kiprusoff in net, where he was just cast aside there. And then the Tampa Bay series, I mean, definitely that was when Jarome was at his finest there, and I mean, too bad things didn't play out, or that no one recognized that Jelinas scored that goal in Game 6 there. But I mean, that was definitely Darryl Sutter's most legendary moment here in Calgary. It was very hard on his tender, and then unfortunately, things didn't play out that we were winning the cup there, but we lost this next season due to the lockout, and I felt that I might make a video on this, and I might wait till the date that the season got canceled, because actually in 2020, that was actually 15 years ago that the 2004-05 season officially got wiped out, and you'll see season not played on the Stanley Cup there, which is unfortunate, but looking back, that was necessary to bring economic certainty and sanity to the NHL, so that, smaller market teams can survive. The other way you could say this is that if the NFL had the same, economic model that the NHL had before the salary cap, the Green Bay Packers wouldn't be around, because the Green Bay Packers are a very small market team, and despite having a great fan base, they wouldn't be able to survive economically. I'm just thinking of that's how I was heard that teams like the Green Bay Packers in the NFL wouldn't survive if there wasn't an economic system there. Maybe trying to compare NFL and NHL is like apples to oranges, but in terms of size of the market, they wouldn't be as viable. But then, the 05-06 season there, we definitely looked like we had a better team there, and we still had some pieces from the 04 team, and Jarome Iginla elevated his game even better. And Miikka Kiprusoff definitely, looked like, this wasn't a fluke here. Maybe we do have one of the best goalies in the league. And, Darryl also brought in, surprisingly, he was tough and brash, and he loved his, Western Canadian players. And I'll get to his drafting record here that you might almost say, do you say he's racist in a way when I get to the draft here? I'm not saying Darryl's racist, but when in terms of picking players in the draft there, because you'll see it's changed now with Brad Trelevin. But going back to the 05-06 season there, the Calgary Flames had, a talented team. We got the Northwest Division there, and actually that was our last division title before last season, where we had the best regular season of the generation, like to call it. But the Calgary Flames, they definitely they could not get that extra win against the Anaheim Ducks there, where and then a number of character guys that we signed were Tony Amonte and even Darren McCarty. We briefly had Darren McCarty, remember that? And he's most synonymous for being one of the character guys for the Detroit Red Wings, and had that grinder band. But we had him for a couple seasons, and it was actually fun. And I believe he actually got married in Calgary at that time. But we just had the right balance of the team, and we almost looked like we recreated that team that we had in 2004. And actually the fact that Roman Turk decided to go back to Europe there when the season was lost, and actually he wanted to stay in Calgary, and he actually wanted to restructure his contract, understanding that he was making too much for his role here, and trying to do it for the team there. But we brought back Noodles, Jamie McLennan, now that you see him on TSN here. But the Calgary Flames definitely could not finish the job against the Ducks there. I remember Game 6 when we were in Anaheim, and that's when you can almost say the start of the under center curse came. But we were tied late and hit a crossbar, and then Anaheim scored one late, and then you could say in the worst Game 7 ever, we lost, I think it was 3-0 to the Anaheim Ducks there. That's the last time that the Calgary Flames actually, if I recall, actually had a Game 7 at home there, and that's something you always fight for. And we definitely didn't do well in Game 7 at home there, and ultimately that was the last time Darryl Sutter was head coach with the Calgary Flames here. Because I remember after that season there, he was kind of talking to the third person himself. Is like, the general manager has to make the coach accountable, and the coach had to make the general manager accountable, and something like that. And Darryl Sutter, I'm going to say he definitely did a great job as a head coach. But this is where the coaching part ends as the Calgary Flames is. After the 2005-06 season there, we had Jimmy Playfair, and actually Jim Playfair started his tenure when we were in St. John, because he was the St. John Flames, was the farm team for the Calgary Flames at the time there. He was the head coach of the St. John Flames, and he worked his way up the organization. And actually, going back to the Greg Gilbert firing, when we decided it was time to let Greg Gilbert go, it seemed a little perplexed at the time, and we felt like this was before the salary cap era, that we needed a big name, someone with a proven track record to be head coach. But Jim Playfair, actually, some were speculating that he was going to be the next head coach of the Calgary Flames at that time there, before Al McNeil took over on an interim basis, because he was still within the organization, and Darryl Sutter took over here. But Darryl Sutter took over, and then that's when he decided that doing two jobs was too much. I can only imagine, being a head coach is a lot of work. Being a general manager is a lot of work on its own, the game today, especially when it's more complex than that. But and now they throw in the salary cap, and you gotta report to your scouting staff and that. But Darryl Sutter was still off the ice, the face of the Calgary Flames, but he decided to step down as head coach and promote Jimmy Playfair as the head coach there. And sometimes some coaches can make that transition from being an assistant to being the head coach, or some also say good cop to a bad cop, because a lot of players actually have a better, relationship, have a more personal relationship with the assistant coach than the head coach here. So, and then going into the 2006-07 season here, the Calgary Flames had Jimmy Playfair as head coach, and actually that turned out to be his only year as head coach here, because the Flames did make the playoffs. They barely squeaked in as an 8 seed there, as the Calgary Flames, they kicked ass at home, but they really stunk on the road there, and that definitely killed the Calgary Flames. And then in that playoff run, we played the Detroit Red Wings there. There was some, rekindling of the playoff series with 2004 there. However, that wasn't the same result there, because it was a bad matchup at the time, because the Calgary Flames had a little more finesse there, and we definitely lost to Detroit in 6 games in overtime there. But that was because Miikka Kiprusoff once again played his lights out there, and of course the Calgary Flames lost on the road the first 2 games, won at home the next 2 games, and then lost Game 5 on the road, and then Game 6 in overtime at home on the road there. But Darryl Sutter, as a general manager, though, he definitely wasn't afraid to roll the dice, because he definitely liked to make a big trade at every draft. And that season coming in, Calgary got Alex Tanguay from the Colorado Avalanche, and that was the first really big trade he made. And then this is where things got really weird with Darryl Sutter as general manager there, because he seemed to got the coaching carousel spinning a lot. And this is where now I got to question his ability in drafting and his ability for coaching here, because Darryl Sutter was still the general manager there, and actually a lot of people were critical of Jim Playfair as head coach, because he wasn't brash or robust, or he wasn't as fiery as Darryl Sutter, or as emotional, and it didn't seem he cared. And actually, I remember going back to that playoff series against Detroit there. I think we lost in Game 2, and Bob McKenzie, I think, was adamant that the Flames should replace Jim Playfair and Darryl come back behind the bench there, and it didn't happen. And it was a bad matchup, regardless who would have been behind the bench for the Calgary Flames at that time. It wasn't 04 again. And we were a little more of a skilled team there, and we just was a bad matchup, and Detroit was making sure that they weren't going to lose to us again. Also, at the time there, Detroit was also going through a transition where Scotty Bowman actually retired after he led them to the Stanley Cup. And I remember they had Dave Lewis, and he was a long-time assistant with the Detroit Red Wings that didn't make that transition well either. And Detroit, I think actually, that was when Mike Babcock, I believe, was head coach of the Detroit Red Wings that year when we lost them in 07 there. And that was after when Mike Babcock first was one of the young up-and-coming coaches after he led the Ducks to their Stanley Cup final appearance there. But, Jim Playfair, he wasn't fired. He still was head coach. And then one day, the Flames, they like to do things behind the scenes here. And, one day, I was just on the bus as usual, going to work. And then I got off the bus, and I was going to the train station to catch the train there. This is back when more people still read a thing called a newspaper. But I saw the picture on the Sun there. There was a picture of Mike Keenan's face on the face of the Sun. And I was wondering, why the heck is Mike Keenan's face doing on the face of the Sun there? And then the Calgary Sun, to make you sell the paper, they always put a sticky ad on the headline there. And I thought it said Coach Keenan. And then that's when I first heard him, the Flames hired Mike Keenan as head coach. And that came out of nowhere. And, there was no speculation that Calgary was looking for a new head coach, and Mike Keenan was out of the game for a couple of years, and Mike Keenan definitely worked with Darryl Sutter in Chicago there, and we got Mike Keenan towards the end of his NHL career before he went over to the KHL there, but he is a coach with a reputation there, and actually he did mellow out compared to his time when he first started with Philadelphia and Chicago there, but Actually, if you look online, and I actually read this article here, and actually it was told by Jeremy Roenick, because Roenick played for, started his NHL career with Mike Keenan there, and actually it was titled Last Great Asshole Coach. And now he was with us after, he had that reputation there and kept hanging on there. And actually I felt he did all right as head coach. It was neither a success nor a failure here. But Jim Playfair was still with the organization as an associate coach here. And then, we still had Darryl Sutter was still the organization. Jim Playfair was still the organization despite having Mike Keenan. And the only thing that it seemed to be the case was, all right, Mike, you want to coach the Flames? Sure, Darryl. And it's like, but you got to still work with my assistants, because Rich Preston was still here and Jim Playfair was still here. And then after he was told by the brass, because Mike Keenan signed a 3-year deal with the Calgary Flames there, and he coached the Flames for 2 seasons there. I felt after the first season we didn't beat the San Jose Sharks there, and we were still on the road there, but I think we still had a chance there and couldn't beat the Sharks. But the next season there, I felt, let's give Sutter and Keenan one more season here. And the next season we did not beat the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round there. And keep in mind, this was a year before Chicago started their 3 cups in 6 years there, back in 2009 there. I felt we could have beaten the Chicago Blackhawks, but I remember we didn't have Rob McGuire, and we were injured there, and that was definitely a factor why we couldn't beat the Chicago Blackhawks. But we beat them up, that they couldn't advance after the second round there. But Darryl Sutter actually fired Mike Keenan there, and he was told to fire him because we didn't get out of the first round there. And Mike Keenan kind of had a little, well, why are you firing me thing? And Darryl's like, well, I wouldn't have fired you if I wasn't told. So, he was fired, and then eventually Darryl brought in his brother, Brent Sutter, after he resigned from the San Jose Sharks here. And then that's when really, I think, things went downhill for Darryl Sutter here with the Calgary Flames there, because going into the 9-10 season there, we definitely Darryl Sutter he definitely loved to roll the dice. He always had to make a trade at the draft and trade the deadline there. But the 9-10 season, I felt we really started downfall here, because eventually, at the draft, I remember, we made the first big trade, was getting Alex Tanguay from Colorado when we traded Jordan Leopold. And then, when we hired Mike Keenan, we brought in Adrian Coyne, because that was one defenseman that Calgary liked, and the fact that he had a huge contract at the time, but they also thought that, well, Adrian Coyne, he's a veteran that Mike Keenan liked when he was in Vancouver. And sorry, Canuck fans, but I know he's not liked in Vancouver. Me, I neither like or dislike Mike Keenan as head coach, what he did with the Flames. It was just shocking how it was done. And then I remember in 2008, we traded away Alex Tanguay because he didn't fit in with Mike Keenan, and that was when we swung those deals to swap picks and get Michael Camilleri there. And then 2009, we made that trade to, and actually, in 2009 there, another reason that you thought I thought we had a good enough team and probably should have gotten out of the first round was Darryl Sutter definitely brought in Todd Bertuzzi for a season there, and that was fresh off of, he actually signed a big contract with the Anaheim Ducks there after he moved on from Vancouver and Florida there. But they bought him out, so he was willing to, take any job, and he came here. And Todd Bertuzzi also worked under Mike Keenan with Vancouver Canucks there. But Darryl Sutter, definitely, you could say one of his man crushes was Olli Jokinen. And it was definitely weird how he handled Olli Jokinen, because we made that trade to get Olli Jokinen in here to finally find that centerman for Jarome Iginla. And Olli Jokinen also was one of the players that I think actually didn't mind playing under Mike Keenan with his Florida connection. But then going into the 9-10 season there, after we brought in Brent Sutter and the job he did with the New Jersey Devils there, that was really that season started his downfall, because Calgary they were in that spot where he didn't know, and the worst spot you could be in the salary cap, and definitely Darryl did spend to the cap, but we also traded away a lot of second-round picks and prospects to get guys like Olli Jokinen or bring back, some older free agents, and then eventually trade them a year later. But coming into the 9-10 season, we had higher expectations. We had Ballmeister, and we still got Jokinen, and Dion was coming up, and then eventually, I'm going to say it was that stretch there at the end of January there where we've been floundering up and down there. That's when Darryl made a bad trade with Toronto in my mind to get rid of Dion Phaneuf there, and then he decided after a year of getting Olli Jokinen, and not even a full calendar year, we traded him, and we sacrificed Brandon Prust to get Olli Jokinen, and it was fitting that we traded Prust and Jokinen to the Rangers to break on a bad contract in Ellis Kodalik, where eventually he got buried in the minors there. And then the Flames just missed the playoffs there, and the worst place to be in the salary cap is spend to the cap, be in the middle where you just missed the playoffs, but you always think you're a piece or two away, but you don't think it's time to blow it up and rebuild. And going after the 2010 there, we traded away Olli Jokinen to only sign him back, and then we signed Alex Tanguay back. Although they were cheaper players, but it kind of just didn't make sense. And I think it was how Darryl Sutter handled his tender with the Calgary Flames, because it got really awkward when he brought in Brent Sutter. His family and business are two different things, and it's kind of tough to separate the two there. And and then ultimately it was December 8th, 2010. Because Darryl Sutter felt before coming into the 10-11 season that the Flames, Darryl Sutter said he wanted some help to do his general manager duties, and we decided to hire Jay Feaster, and at the time he was the assistant general manager, and that's when Jay Feaster, we definitely remember him from the 2004 run, because he happened to be the general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning there, and some say maybe he didn't get enough credit or too much credit for building the Tampa Bay Lightning to being the Stanley Cup champions, because he was the general manager that was when they won the Cup in 2004, fortunately against us. But some say, well, it was Rick Dudley that built up the team there, and but I think Jay Feaster also was the one that brought in John Tortorella, and he led them to the Cup there. But now Jay Feaster was with the assistant general manager of the Calgary Flames there, and then going into the 10-11 season, and it was December 28th, 2010 there, that it was exactly 8 years from when he was hired to be the head coach of the Calgary Flames, and then he turned the team around in that time and showed some hope, even though the season was lost. And then obviously this happened, his first full season as head coach, lost the season of lockout, and then got a few more good pieces on the team. And also I should also go back to getting a few pieces is when we in the 7th season there, the Calgary Flames brought back Craig Conroy, a fan favorite that fit in well with this team there, because the reason why we couldn't keep Conroy was he didn't want to leave Calgary, but LA offered him a deal he couldn't refuse, and that's in our case, bringing guys back that are more expensive and older. And I remember we made that big trade to get Wayne Primo and Brad Stewart. And Brad Stewart definitely had some success, as a Calgary hitman, but and then traded away to Andrew Ference there. But I'm just looking at all that and his general manager moves there, and I just felt the 2010 season, that's definitely where he lost it there. And it was actually Ken King that was told by the ownership, probably he was told that if you don't ask Darryl Sutter to resign or let him go, you're going too, Ken. And Darryl Sutter obliged. He stepped down as general manager, and Jay Feaster took over. And I think it's clear after what happened there, it was December 2010, that Darryl Sutter left the Calgary Flames as general manager, that he is one heck of a coach, but a very, very social general manager here. Because as you recall there, it was a year later, just under a year later, it was December 2011 there, that his next job was he became the head coach of the Los Angeles Kings. This fittingly, general manager Dean Lombardi, who was the general manager of the San Jose Sharks, had their connection with their Northern California days. He was the head coach of the Los Angeles Kings, and he only led them to the Stanley Cup and won it in 2012, and then he did it again in his second full season as head coach and got him 2 cups in 3 years, just as head coach. But it definitely shows he has a short shelf life, though, as head coach, because a couple years later, teams locked him out from the dressing room, and then eventually when he asked the staff to, these idiots locked me out, can you open the door for me? And then he opens the door, and he was greeted with trash cans blocking his way. And I think the game has definitely passed Darryl Sutter by, and I think he's in the visor with the Anaheim Ducks now. Some advisor, like, he's just someone that works really, really, really behind the scenes there. But he was definitely a great head coach. So was the general manager, because he drafted Dion Phaneuf in 2003, and you can probably credit Brent Sutter and his connection there, because he was a Red Deer Rebel and that. And I say Dion was definitely a great draft pick there, but I remember he drafted Chris Chucko. If you're saying who exactly, then he drafted Matt Pelech. Who? Well, exactly. And I remember he reinvented his game to be a grinder defenseman at the San Jose Sharks there, but none of those guys made much of an impact. He drafted Leland Irving, who definitely didn't really make it as much in the NHL. He had a couple good games. In 2007, we were still drafting late there. He drafted Michael Backlund. That's a great pick, and we still have him today. And then 2008, he drafted Greg Nemes, because he happened to be on the Windsor Spitfires top line, and I think Taylor Hall was on that team, and didn't work out. And then in 2009, we drafted Tim Erickson, and he definitely didn't want to be a Flame. And then in 2010, because we decided to go big and get Ole Jokin in there and missed the playoffs, we didn't have a first or a second that year, and definitely didn't pick anybody well in 2010 there. And I mean, the best players that Darryl Sutter found as general manager, who actually are all still with the organization right now. Well, in 2004, after the magical run, Darryl Sutter happened to sign this Mark Giordano guy. He was a free agent there, and actually he did play a couple seasons, and then he went to Russia for a year because Calgary wasn't willing to offer him a one-year contract, and then he refined his game more and came back. And you could say he's going to come down as one of the best defensemen to ever play for the Flames, and showing inspiration that you don't have to be drafted. And then in 2008, we swung and missed on Greg Nemes there, but we drafted T.J. Brody, and then the Michael Backlund draft there. But going back to what I say, you can say, I'm not going to criticize Darryl's racist there, but he definitely loved his Western Canadian, born players. But I remember this whole time that he was a general manager here, he actually didn't draft a Russian once. You can actually look that up, and I remember hearing that, there wasn't very many Europeans that he drafted, but he didn't draft any Russians. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or if he had a thing against the Russians, and I mean it's his drafting record. I mean, I didn't think he had too many good picks there, and our farm system was definitely depleted there, and we spent to the cap that he definitely left Jay Feaster a mess that I'm going to say he cleaned some of it up there, but he definitely wasn't good on trades or some trades and some decisions he made. But Darryl didn't make that many good decisions as general manager in my mind. And I mean, a lot of free agents that he signed also didn't last long. I mean, he definitely, Alex Tanguay, if he's used properly, was a great player. And Mike Camilleri was a great player for that 1 year. And it was Jay Feaster that brought him back. But we definitely decided to spend all this money on getting Jay Bouwmeester. And that's why we couldn't get Mike Camilleri. But, we got Craig Conroy back, a little more expensive. But, I think he just took where the money was because it was guaranteed because there was uncertainty in the lockout here. But I'm going to say that's my happy Darryl Sutter Day reflection here. That we were very happy when we brought him in as head coach, and after when we've gone through Brent Sutter, and looking back, we were better off welcoming Brent Sutter back instead of Don Hay and Greg Gilbert. And then, Darryl Sutter, he kept the coaching carousel spinning the whole time that he was in Calgary. I mean, he still was the organization. He still had Jim play for the organization, but then he had Mike Keenan, and then when he was ordered to let Mike Keenan go, because Darryl Sutter and Mike Keenan had their connection back when he was with Chicago, and actually one of the reasons why Mike Keenan, if you look back his history and his career timeline when he was with Chicago, one of the reasons why he decided to just be general manager only, because he was worried at that time, or Chicago was worried at the time, that they were going to lose Darryl Sutter to another team there. So Mike Keenan decided, well, I'll just stay at the organization and be a general manager, and Darryl's the coach now. But that was that, and there was that connection, and then there was that family connection with Brent Sutter there. And actually, apparently, after when Ken King ordered Darryl Sutter to resign, and at that time, you might say it was nameism, but we were definitely Suttered out by the time, and we still had Brent Sutter for a couple seasons there, and even then, I liked his sound bites. He definitely was the most enthusiastic and had the most sound bites, and he was most approachable to the media of the three Sutters that we had as head coach. I mean, Darryl sometimes, he drops good sound bites, but there's a lot of things that at that time, especially when we were in that mediocrity, not get to the even the playoffs. There were a lot of times that my blood boiled hearing the sound bites and why he made this move and that move there. And I'll be actually, when it gets closer to the date there, since I've revisited a couple trades here, I'll be doing one where we're going to look back on the Dion trade, and I don't think that was a good trade that we made at the time there, but we were definitely Suttered out here, and we were just as happy, or maybe happier, when he decided to, or when he was kind of showing the door without saying what Donald Trump says, "You're fired." But that's my reflection, but I'm going to still say we should declare December 28th Happy Darryl Sutter Day. It was definitely a very memorable 8 years exactly when he came in as head coach and left as general manager here, and we were happy when he came here as head coach, and definitely loved what he done as coach. Not so as much as general manager, and we were happy and say thank goodness, and he was shown the door or asked to resign. I mean, when you're under contract, it's like you're still getting paid there, and I kind of felt, I felt still more happy for Darryl Sutter when he finally got back to being head coach and got his 2 cups in 3 years, the Los Angeles Kings, as a Flames fan. But you still gotta say, what if? Especially the 2014 team, because I remember Rob McGarry was on that team, and I was also happy to see him get a ring 10 years too late, but and same with Darryl, but or 8 years for the 2012 team, but and then you could say it was a dark time as a general manager there, because Cliff Fletcher is definitely the best general manager the Flames ever had, and he was the first general manager starting with Atlanta all the way till I think it was 1990, and then he took a more prestigious job with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and and then after that, I think things went down with Doug Risebrough, where we also were forced to dismantle the team. I think Al Coates did a okay job as general manager. He brought in Jarome Iginla after we were forced to trade Joe Newnick. I made that video, and then Craig Button, I think he was so-so, and then Darryl Sutter wasn't scared to gamble, especially at the draft table, and I think eventually Darryl Sutter sacrificed the future and and assets for now, which definitely bit us in the end for the next guy, Jay Feaster, where he had to try to clean up some of his mess and try to give us some more cap flexibility. But ultimately, I felt what did Jay Feaster was the Ryan O'Reilly debacle, and what made it a debacle was in that lockout shortened season, we offer sheeted Ryan O'Reilly away from the Colorado Avalanche. There was a role in place that he had to play, that he played a couple of games in the KHL, which meant he had to go on waivers first before we claimed his rights. So we would have lost, and the compensation that we offered him would have meant that if, we signed him, or after going on waivers, he would likely have gotten picked. That first round pick that ultimately we used on Sean Monahan went to Colorado, and thankfully, thank you Colorado, thanks for signing him. We definitely had a different course of history, and then obviously didn't get enough for this guy, Jarome Iginla and Jay Bouwmeester. So, I definitely saw why Darryl Sutter decided to, keep patching things up, but it definitely, and the fact that Jarome, he was a great guy and great player and great person and was marketable, but looking back, we could have gotten more for him then, but maybe who knows what we would have gotten if Darryl decided to make that move. But this is my long video on Happy Darryl Sutter Day, December 28th. We should make that a local holiday, reflecting on the good, bad, and ugly that Darryl Sutter did. And it just coincidentally, he came here on the 28th of December, and he left here on the 20th of December. And, for a while there, we had signs that say, "In Sutter we trust." And I remember this meme that I saw in offices, especially when I worked security, during that magical run in the 2004 playoff run, that people had in their, bulletin boards there, because I patrolled some office towers there. There was actually one meme, and I can't find it on the internet. There was a picture of Darryl Sutter pointing in practice, and it says, "I want you to wear red." But I have mixed feelings for Darryl Sutter's time as Calgary Flame and his whole career in general. To sum it up, he was one heck of a coach, and he definitely made his mark and be a part of Flames history in that front on, getting another generation of Flames fans to experience, a run to the Stanley Cup, and we're definitely long overdue for another one. Hopefully there's one here soon, but be on the right end of it. But there was definitely some gaffes that he made as general manager, and I think part of it was his philosophy and economics, but excuse me there, but it was, I still felt that Darryl Sutter wasn't coached long enough, and it was his decision that he decided to step down. And heck, I doubt he'll be watching this, and I doubt he gives a damn what I said, but he doesn't. That was his decision, it's his legacy. He definitely did some. He brought this team back up when he did as coach, and then we just stayed in mediocrity as general manager and slowly declined down, and it just got awkward. And I know that after, going back to what I meant to say about after when Ken King asked Darryl Sutter to step down as general manager, apparently Brent Sutter, who still was head coach of the Calgary Flames till the end of the 2011-12 season there, before Jay Feaster and Brent Sutter didn't see eye to eye and moved on from that. Apparently it was after that, because it was early in January 2012, where, heck, Darryl Sutter came back to town as head coach of the Los Angeles Kings, and that was actually after when we got Mike Camilleri back, which Jay Feaster kind of kept that legacy going on there, where we like to bring back former Flames that are older and more expensive that Darryl started, but that was that game where we had both Sutters. It was Brent and Darryl, because there was many times when Darryl and Brian, because I remember the Battle of the Sutters when we had Brian Sutter and San Jose had Darryl Sutter, and too bad we didn't have a Battle of the Sutters, when one Sutter coached the Flames, one Sutter coached the Oilers, and I don't think that's going to happen anymore, because Brian and definitely Darryl, the games passed them by, and I think Brent Sutter could still be a decent coach in the NHL today, especially when he still works with junior, but he's definitely, he loves Red Deer too much and the farm too much. That's why he's still, he owns the Rebels, but he's still associated with them. But apparently they didn't speak. Both Brent and Darryl. Too many Sutters. Didn't speak each other until that game, and then they had a private conversation. So there must have been a rift at the Christmas time at the time, because Brent was still with the organization as head coach, and Darryl was the general manager, and they definitely had their differences in roles there. But yeah, I mean, this is just my story, and I just definitely a lot to say. I mean, there was definitely a lot that happened, and I had a lot of emotions and feelings on this, and there was just a lot to talk about Happy Darryl Sutter Day, about his time as coach, and his time as coach and general manager, and his time just as general manager here. And I mean, now I think he's with the Ducks as some advisor, and now the Ducks have been declining, but they have a young team that's still up and coming, and keep those young guys. Keep that advice, Darryl, that Anaheim needs to trade out some expiring contracts, not get older like he did here. But what do you guys think? Are you having a happy Darryl Sutter Day? As it just worked out. December 28th, he came here and left. Not on the same date, but I mean, it was just something neat to think about. And I think most people agree with me. He was one heck of a coach. We loved and thankful what he did as head coach. I felt he left too soon, but then general manager, it was almost too much like playing NHL, whatever the latest version is now, where he always kept trading and gambling, and definitely kept pushing the chips on the table and sweating, like in Texas Hold'em Poker there. But yeah, so if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and follow along there. I definitely talk Calgary sports, including Happy Darryl Sutter Day, but I also do some personal vlogs, sometimes attempt to be a comedy, and just, share moments at said sporting events. And when I'm on holidays there, maybe even talk politics between there, but everything I have is in playlists there, and I got my social media links below if you want to follow along on other platforms. So if that's something you'd like to do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and go Flames. Happy Darryl Sutter Day to you, and hopefully you enjoy your Happy Darryl Sutter Day with all your friends, family, fellow Flames fans, fellow hockey fans. I mean, maybe Los Angeles will have their own Happy Darryl Sutter Day, except they have 2 cups to celebrate it with. But this is my tribute and my wish to everyone out there to have a Happy Darryl Sutter Day, and I'll see you in the next video here.